and welcome to the Open Mastermind group for September. I'm going to go ahead and record this so we can get this out to everybody, because I know that a lot of people could not make it live today, but the information is going to be so important today, and we're going to have a conversation around it. I have with me and for you, Nan McKay. I sent her bio out. I sent all of her information out with the meeting notice, but let me just tell you that Nan McKay is a total rock star. And of course, why would I introduce you to anybody who wasn't a total rock star? But today is no exception. Nan, she has been in business for a very long time. She's helped to start a business, which she is still the president of, that I'm going to let her tell you about. But let me tell you, ladies, it is a very large business that has grown across the country. And she's got so much experience. And now she has a second business. Her second business, Nan McKay Connects, is the one that we are actually engaging with today, where she has training programs and where she does a whole lot of different things. But one of the things we're going to focus on today is bridging the generational gap. So as you know, we've got 4 different generations out in the workforce right now. And that creates some interesting conversations and some interesting chasms that need to be bridged for communication and for connection. And that's what Nan's going to help us with today. Nan McKay, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to a great hour.
Me too.
Okay to start?
Okay to start.
All right. Welcome, welcome. Have you ever felt like this? You're quitting? You're quitting? I can't believe you're quitting, but you just were hired 2 months ago, and I sent you to all that training. How can you be leaving us? Sound familiar? I'm going to be buried with more work. I can't get my production going. I can't get things out the door. Oh, this is so hard. And have you wondered why? Why me? I have worked so hard to make this company come together. I've put in all the hours. I've put in all the extra time. I've grown it. Why am I having to go through this now when I'm even thinking about maybe even stepping back a little and letting somebody else take the lead on some of this? But I can't when every time I turn around, I've got another baby boomer that's retiring. And over here, I have people that I just hired that have decided not to stay. What's happening and why? Well, it's not fair. It's not. We really have paid our dues. We wear a lot of hats when we're in charge. I don't care how big you are. We have almost 2,000 employees in our bigger company, the one that I started in 1980. But those multiple hats are still on. And it's hard to find time to even focus on something when you constantly have to shift from one thing to another. We've got all the technological changes that are coming so fast. I'm a huge proponent of AI, but I'm telling you that is going to revolutionize the strategy of our business. So we've got much going on that we're having to deal with, and we feel like we're putting out fires every time we turn around. We feel like we're almost into crisis management rather than into that strategic management that we said we were going to do, that we thought we had our hands around. It's really hard. And we've got maybe a lack of confidence in what's really needed in our culture. Because when we've got all these millennials and Gen Zs coming in, and soon they're going to be 50% of our workforce, we have to turn around and say, wow, maybe I have to pay attention to how to communicate with different generations. It can't be necessarily the same culture that I have had in the past. I've got to think about how I can upskill some of these people. How I don't have a lot of money. It seems like every time I send somebody to training, let's say supervisory management training, to make them better supervisors, I turn around and I've just paid out the $1,000 for them to travel and attend this session, and they turn around in 3 months and tell me that they're leaving. The legacy that I've built, is it starting to slip out of my hands? That's where some of us are today. So I want to think about why we're having this. And one of the things that's so interesting is something I started studying back in probably 1990s. And here's your question. Where were you when you were 10 years old? Now think back. So what year was that for you? I discovered someone named Morris Massey. And Dr. Morris Massey worked for the University of Colorado. And what he said is that your values get shaped when you're about 10 years old. And what shapes your values, much of what shapes it, is what is happening in the world around you when you were 10. So if you think back and you think, what were the important figures? What was happening in that world around you? You start thinking, okay, that's maybe why my values are what they are today. And then we have to realize that when we're looking at the Gen X's, the Millennials, the Gen Ys, the Gen Zs, where were they when they were 10 and what was going on in the world? That starts to give us a clue as to why we think differently and why we have different values. Now, for me, when I think about what was going around me in the world when I was 10, that was not really what shaped my values, because they say that your values are locked in at 10 unless you have experienced a significant emotional event. Now, that a significant emotional event could be a divorce, it could be a death, it could be all kinds of things, but it was so significant to you that it made a change in how you look at things. For me, that happened when I was 11. And I can still hear those feet pounding up the stairs with me huddled in the bathroom, which is the only door that locked in the house, with my 6-year-old brother and my 3-month-old sister. And I could hear them starting to yell. And they were saying, "Where is she? We're going to find her. Where is she?" Because it was me that they were after. That has a complete story. I'm not going to give it to you today, but I will tell you that was the event that changed who I am today. And therefore, when you look back and you say, was it my values when I was 10 that shaped me? Or have I had a significant emotional event that played into the change of those values? So who is Nan McKay? Let me quickly tell you. Yes, I'm founder and president of Nan McKay and Associates. Did that in 1980. I had worked for government for 17 years and decided I wanted to do something else, although I was executive director back then, but worked my way up from secretary. But I decided that after I had been traveling 40 weeks a year for about 30 years, that I probably was time to turn it over to my son, because the whole industry had kind of changed. So I'm still president of that company, but I don't do all the day-to-day. But I can't just sit. So I founded another company. And this is Nan McKay Connects, LLC. And that's the one that I'm really doing a lot of work on today. So I'm a speaker, I'm an author, I've published a couple books, they're on Amazon. I have a podcast, I have 2 YouTube channels, but my passion is navigating what I call the complexities of entrepreneurship and supervision. And that's where I am. And you say, why? Because, you know, I've started 6 businesses over my life, and I'm seeing something today that is very portentous and that really has a big impact on what's happening to us today. We've got 10,000 baby boomers a day retiring, a day. That means we're going to have a huge shift in the values, in the knowledge, in the procedures, and everything in every way when they leave. Do you realize that the US staff turnover today rate is 60%? And 70% of the people don't like where they work. Those things are making a huge shift in our culture. So if they are, let's step back and say, well, let's take a look at all these generations in the workplace. And let's start thinking about what do each one of them want? And how are we going to redesign our culture today to meet the needs of 4 generations? And soon will be 3. But another couple of years before that happens. So let's look at things like the length of stay in a job. We'll start with those baby boomers. The average length of stay for a baby boomer is 8 years. If the job paid well and it allowed me to live up to the lifestyle I wanted, but then I don't even feel a need to leave if I'm a baby boomer. So I stayed much longer. For many of people, they stayed all the way through. Gen X is only 5 years. Now, why? Remember that Gen X lived through an economic period where a lot of their parents got laid off. And they started thinking that rather than looking for that gold watch at the end, like the traditionalists did, they started thinking, you know, if those people laid off my parents after they were so loyal for all those years, why should I be loyal to an employer? Look what happened back then. Remember that the Gen Xers are our latchkey kids. And I'm going to talk about that more in just a minute because that had an effect as well. But the main reason was that they did not have that same loyalty to the company as certainly traditionalists and even baby boomers. And then we've got the Gen Y. Now that's 2 years as an average, but they don't want to stay very long in the company because they feel they need the upward mobility. And if they are not seeing a way for them to move up in the company, then they are not going to stay. And then we've got the Gen Zers. Hard to tell too much yet about the Gen Zers, and I'm going to give you some age ranges so you can kind of place people into the different generations. But I would say maybe about the same as millennials. We'll see on those. So what's really the problem? The problem is that we've got these baby boomers that are leaving, and they are a large generation. Those were the kids that were born after World War II. And so they got a big generation. And the people under them, when we look at the Gen Xers, are a smaller generation. So the problem is that we are not going to be able to fill those managerial positions that the baby boomers are leaving with only the Gen Xers. We are going to have to dip down into our millennials, maybe into even a few Gen Zers, but primarily the millennials, to be able to bring them up and upskill them quickly to get them into the managerial positions. And we have to pay attention to what they are looking for. It's really kind of like we are prospectors out there looking. And it is difficult today because every time we turn around, it feels like we're in a jungle, and it feels like there may be, a big cat, one of those panthers or tigers or something that's going to quickly come and jump on us because we feel like we're having to move so quickly. We've got so many balls in the air, and then they turn over with it so fast, and we've got the onboarding we have to do, and it's getting expensive, and I'm not getting the production I want. And so all of those things are coming to play with us. So we have to step back and say, what do people want today? The main thing they want is to be challenged and developed. Now keep that in mind as we start talking about the culture, because it affects a lot of different areas. It affects things like annual reviews and ongoing conversations, and what's the difference between a boss versus a coach. And what about pay? How much influence does that have? And is pay more important than purpose? Because those things all affect culture, and they affect the employee retention that either you have or you don't have today. Now, you may not have this as a problem yet, but you will, because the minute you start shifting and you shift the baby boomers, you're going to see we have a big difference in the upcoming wants for that culture. So let's talk about this. It's the culture of feedback. If employees are highly engaged, look at this. I think this is fascinating. Highly engaged employees are 87% less likely to leave your organization. So I've got to figure out, wow, how do I engage people? Well, it's experiences, and we're going to talk about all this. It's expectations. What do they expect, and meeting their expectations? It's meeting the needs that they have, which are a little different than the needs of different generations in past. And what are their desires? And you know what? The only way really to tell is to ask, to talk to them about it. So what am I saying when I'm talking to them? Ask for things like this. Ask for feedback. Tell me about how you feel about your job. I don't know if you've heard about stay interviews, but stay interviews are very important because I'm picking out my best employees and I'm asking them, tell me about what you like about our company. Why are you here? Why do you like being here? Because if you start finding out what is keeping people, not just why they're leaving, but what is keeping people there, you can do more of it. Then you can start seeing, this is what I need in creating my culture. Number two, carefully listen. I have a saying that says, mouth in gear, ears don't work, which simply means I can't just take it in and then interrupt them quickly, because maybe it's not exactly what I wanted to hear, or maybe I think I have to clarify better for them quickly. But carefully listen, mouth shut. Clarify when you need understanding, but let them get it completely out. And then adjust accordingly and start the process again. So what I use as a saying when I'm in the middle of doing this is, I let them talk, I listen, which is hard for me, and then I say, what I think I hear you saying is, and I feed them back what I think I hear them saying. When I do that, it starts to clarify what they actually said, because then they will say, well, that's partially it, but da 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 da. And then I can do it again. Oh, okay. So what I hear you saying is, and I feed it back again. And that's the back and forth that is helpful to talk about what people really want out of their job, what they like out of their job, what they wish was different out of their job. We need to know all of that. And those are the stay interviews. That's one way that you can do it. So let's kind of categorize people a little bit so we have some idea about the age ranges that we're talking about. So baby boomers are today about 59 to 77. Now, baby boomers are characterized by pretty much four things. One, they're optimistic, they're competitive, they have a high work ethic, and that's what you miss the most when you're looking at some of the younger generations, and they're loyal. Okay, that's baby boomers. So think now, who am I? Am I a baby boomer? Next, Gen X. Gen X is about 43 to 58. And on the Gen Xers, again, four things. They're very independent. Why? These were the latchkey kids. When they were growing up in the about 10-year-old era, that was the time frame when their both parents started to work. Of course, some was before that, of course, but that's when it really started to come into play. And they were given a key to the house and said, now come right in after school. I want you to go right in, turn that lock back on, and I don't want you to go out of the house until I get home. Because that's the way we had to have that, maybe hour and a half to 2 hours at the end of the day. Sometimes that's the only way that we could handle it. They became the latchkey kids, and they are very independent because of it. Now we have the Gen Ys or Millennials. Those two terms are the same. And they're about 27 to 42 today. Yeah, can you imagine? I mean, keep thinking those Millennials are just kids. They're not. They're up to 42. But they're very tech savvy. No question about that. They grew up with technology. They're highly educated, most of them, but that has a side to it too, because they're highly educated, which means they oftentimes have big payments to make on student loans. So there's some pieces to that that are still important today that affect us today. And they're very socially conscious. All right, now let's look at the next one, Gen Zs. These are about 26 or under. Now you're going to see a little bit different age ranges as you start looking at out on the internet. But this is generally pretty much accepted by everybody, by most people. They're entrepreneurial. They're the people that are probably going to have a side hustle even if they have a job. Interesting. Or maybe 2 side hustles instead of a job. They're creative, and they have a pretty demanding nature. They kind of think they know what they want and they're going to get it. So they're a little different than the Millennials. We don't quite know how they're going to play out yet because there's still not that many yet in the workforce, but it's building and building quickly. So let's look at some interesting statistics. You have all of my notes on this. You have my PowerPoints. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of these that I think are most important. When I look at the baby boomers, I think one thing that's interesting is that 1/3 of the baby boomers who are between 65 and 72 are still either working or looking for work. Now that may surprise you, but there's a lot of reasons for that. And I won't go into them real deeply, but a couple of reasons are, A, people don't feel old anymore when they're like 65 or 72. They don't feel like they're past their prime. They don't feel like they're granny, on the rocking chair, just baking cookies all day. That's not who people are today. So therefore, they still feel like they have something to give. It's just that they don't necessarily want to work in that job that took them full time, that they were in full time. And so they might want to work part-time, they might want to work contract, they might want to volunteer, they might want to work full-time, but at a different kind of job. So that's an interesting statistic. And of course, it also relates to financial. It's not cheap to live today. So if they don't want to dip into that 401k, you know, one of the things they're thinking about is, I better see that I've got a little supplemental so I don't have to. Why? Well, people are living to be in their 90s and some of them all the way to 100. So they know that 401k has got to last a long time. Then we've got the Gen Xers. Now, I think this is an interesting statistic. 47% identify mental health as their top issue. This is going to be really interesting when we go to talk about what do people want in a culture today. Remember that piece of that. That's important. The Gen Ys are considered to be the most worried generation about their financial future. And I think that's because many of them graduated from college with big, heavy student loans that they still have to pay, A. And B is, look at your rent today. They go to rent an apartment, you know, you used to be able to rent with maybe one person and share. Now you've got to have about 3 or 4 people to share to be able to pay rent. And a lot of them are still living at home because of that. And then we've got Gen Zs, and 48 of Gen Zs in the US are non-white, and 60% don't believe in traditional gender differences. So that says that we have a culture that is going to have a diversity element to it that has to be addressed. It has to be looked at. People have to feel comfortable that there is a place for them in your organization. All right, just some interesting things, I think. Now let's look at the generations at work and look at some percents. Those traditionalists, they're like going out the door finally, most of them. Some of them, like people like maybe me, you know, are like, I'm going to work until I'm 105, or I can't talk or walk anymore or something, or I'm dead. But there's a very few people that still want to be in it. The baby boomers, 23%. Now, why this gets to be important to look at is that when we look at our Gen X, see how they're 20%? And the baby boomers are starting to come down because that 10,000 a day is going to make a difference. And now we can start to see that when we look at 5 years from now, that's going to look very different than it does today. We've got 44% millennials. So now we see the baby boomers who used to be the biggest generation are now starting to winnow down. The Gen Xers never were a very big generation. The millennials are quite a big generation, and now 44% of the workforce. And then we're looking at our Gen Zers who are just coming in and will be making a big difference in the workforce for statistics. All right, so what happens with all these multiple generations? Well, first of all, it creates generational differences that we have to look at. Because if we got a whole bunch of people trying to get along in one little bubble, our workplace, we have to be able to see that we've got some differences, and it's going to affect how well they get along together and how well they work together if we acknowledge that there are differences. So organizations really need to look for more individual ways to attract people. And remember that one fit approach no longer works. It's not my way or the highway anymore. That's not the way we have to manage. It's not one style fits all. It's not just one way. And so therefore we have to say, who drives the boat? It's me, because if I'm at the top, I drive the boat. I influence everything, including the culture. So let's take a look at what people want. Now, interestingly enough, a lot of people think everybody wants remote work and they want it exclusively. Interestingly enough, that's not in the top 3 demands. The top 3 demands are these things: health and wellness, training and development, and diversity and culture. So why is remote work not there? And I think this is fascinating. It's the fear that if they're not present, that's going to affect who gets the training and reskilling opportunities. An interesting figure is that 2/3 of the employees would leave a job due to lack of training and development. So that starts to tell you that, wow, now I can start to see what culture I'm going to need. 4 things for you to focus on. And this was a survey done by Deloitte. And when you look at what culture, you have to take a look at what people need and want. Number 1 is learning and development opportunities. If they don't see opportunities, these millennials are going to go. 2 is a work-life balance. Remember we talked a little bit about that with Gen X's? Well, Gen Ys feel the same thing. 3 is purposeful work, meaning I need to feel like I'm making a difference. I need to feel like what I'm doing is important. And that's where we have to learn how to link the job with a bigger cause, with a bigger picture. And then 4th is a collaborative and inclusive environment. Now, when we start breaking this all down, you're going to see how much this matters. So I want you to look at some things that I'm going to call generational preferences. And I've got a lot of information for you that you can take back and start saying, wow, I think maybe I could make some adjustments based on knowing this. Culture. Let's just take culture. Over here, we've got the baby boomers. All the way over here, of course, on the other side, we have the Gen Zers. So the baby boomer wants that hierarchical structure and clearly defined culture. They value loyalty, commitment, job security, and they want to recognize and respect their experience and seniority. Not so in the culture with Gen X, although they're kind of half between the millennials and the baby boomers. So what Gen X is really looking for is that work-life balance and flexibility. Oftentimes, that Gen X is having to take care of aging parents. They're worried about their parents that might be having Alzheimer's. Are they safe? Did one die? Are they sick? They've got that going. Plus, they've still got kids. Some of them, of course, that had kids late in life, they may have a 10-year-old. But most people we're looking at have got, the upper level teenagers or maybe in college and on up. So work-life balance means that, and some flexibility means that they've got a lot on their shoulders that they have to balance and figure out how they're going to handle. Then we've got the millennials, and millennials want that collaborative, they want that purposeful feeling into their work. They want that inclusive environment. They want feedback and they want recognition. Number 4 is, of course, our Gen Zers, and they want a diverse and inclusive workplace culture because that's who they are more and more, is diversity themselves. So they value a lot of things like creativity and innovation and adaptability, and they want authenticity from you. So that's the culture. And then if you look at all this and you take the baby boomers out over here, because within the next 5 to 8 years, most of them are going to be more like the traditionalists are over here. Most of them, if they're still in the workplace, they're probably going to be contract. They're probably going to be in a different role, maybe part-time. So if you take a look at the culture and you don't include them in that, then you're saying, how can I build my culture primarily around those three that are left? So the question for you that I want you to just stop and think about is, on a scale of 1 to 6, because I don't want you to end up in the middle, rate your organization on addressing a change in culture to meet those needs of the 4 generations. I want you to think about your own organization. Make a little note for yourself. What is that for you? How are you doing in changing that culture? Are you addressing the needs? And then take a look at your culture and ask yourself this question. Is it more transactional or is it more transformational in your current culture? So let's look at the difference between the two. A transactional culture is very top-down. They have well-defined roles for employees with the performance relationship to their role. They have centralized decision-making, but less employee input, more decision-making from their top people or themselves only, for the most part. They're more resistant to change, and they're slower to adapt to things like even technology. And over here, we've got our transformational culture. The leader's role, instead of to make all the decisions and totally be in charge, is coach. Now that you may go, oh, I can't buy that one, whatever. But the point is to know this is what they're looking for. Teamwork and collaboration is very present. A flatter organizational style, decision-making, higher level of engagement and satisfaction, those things are all important in a transformational culture. Decentralized decision-making, more ownership, more commitment when it's decentralized, because they're part of it. They're not just having it on them. And then adaptive, they value continuous learning in a transformational environment, proactively respond to change and technology. That's the difference between the two. So again, we can look at ourselves and say, what is mine today? Am I more transactional or am I more transformational? So what are some of our strategies? Well, we say mutual mentorship, which means that employees from different generations, if they can pair up together to share their knowledge, skills, and abilities and their perspectives, that will get you a more open culture where people realize and value what they each bring to the table. It's not just the baby boomers saying, I have all the knowledge, I'm the one you should listen to, I have the experience. Fine, you can share that. But what they don't have always is this piece of it over here, the openness, the flexibility, the innovation, the diversity, all those things. So if we could have mutual mentorship, it can be very productive. 2 is incorporate diverse communication styles. And I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm talking about here. But people's preferences are different by the generations, especially in communication. So we have to look at what those are. I'm going to go there. And then we've got training. And people want different things with training. They're not the same on how they want to be trained. So we want to talk about each one of these things as we go along. Here's another question for you. I just want you to think, step back and say, what strategies have been most effective in your organization for integrating different generations into that workplace culture? What strategies have you used and how effective have they been? And I think you have to look at this. You know, we've got the COVID issue with the pandemic and remote work and people home and people not working and blah, blah, blah. But look at it recently. look at it within the past year and say, what strategies have I been employing to integrate people together, working together by looking at those generations? And then I need to look at, why are employees leaving? If you're having this happen, you need to know why. 38% are leaving because lack of growth in our statistical world. Is that you? 38% are leaving because of lack of training and development opportunities. Is that you? So we have to look at what we aren't providing. And in the survey, 56% want employers to offer more training and career development opportunities. So if people aren't staying, you can start to strategically look at why. 90%, I'm sorry, is that 80 or 90? 90 are looking for training and development programs when searching for a new job. That starts to tell you something. So your question again is to yourself, how do the learning and development preferences vary across generations? In other words, how can I be targeting my learning and development to different generations? How can I tailor those training programs? All right, let's look at some of these. Well, let's look at our learning and development preferences. Those baby boomers like the typical classroom style. Because they like to focus on hierarchy and structure. They're okay with the talking head. They may need some support when we're talking about moving them to technology and doing online learning, but that's what they like. 2 is the Gen X is going to like more practical. I want to be able to apply it immediately. Otherwise, I just don't have time for it. I've got so many different things, but they're open to both traditional and digital learning platforms. The millennials are like, no, I just want collaborative. I want feedback. I want technology. I want to learn at my own speed. I want to learn at my own time, yada, yada. And they want feedback and value and recognition. So what about the Gen Zs? They want on-demand, bite-size learning. Now, interestingly enough, when you look at both millennials and the Gen Zs, they want video, they want short bursts. And when I'm talking short bursts in training, I'm talking 2 to 5 minutes. Videos, 2 to 5 minutes. And not just necessarily a talking head. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we did in this area, but that's what they're looking for. All right, so now we have to say, okay, how can we better match our learning opportunities then to these Gen Ys and Gen Zs? And I'm going to give an example of what I decided to do about that. If that's okay with you. So here's my solution. I recognize that people have got all these different learning styles, and I'm thinking, who do I most need to train in my organization? And I looked at it from, I need to not necessarily train those baby boomers. They're going to be out the door anyway, and they pretty well know their job. The Gen Xs, yes, some, because I want consistency in my supervision and my management, for instance. I want some consistent operation. But how can I mostly meet the needs of the millennials and the Gen Zs? So first I decided, well, first I need a rinse and repeat solution. What does that mean? It means that I need to be sure that I have something available, that I don't just send somebody and pay my $1,000 for them to go off to training and then realize that they turn around and leave. And now in order to do it, I got to spend my $1,000 again. A. 2 is that I need to be sure that whatever I have is cost effective and 3 is I need to see that they need short bursts over a period of time. So it's not like send them to a 5-day training and think you're going to have a perfect supervisor, for instance, out of that. You're probably not. They'll have ideas, they'll come home, but it'll be hard to put it all together because it's just too much, too fast, too soon. And so I need something that that meets all that criteria. That was what I was after. And I need that short story-based video with pictures and movement and video going on with it. So here's what I ended up doing. I developed something called a Leader Accelerator program. And I found an app that takes what I call a story video because it turns your text into video. And it has closed caption on it as well. So if I made short little videos about some leadership topic that I was training on, let's take situational leadership, for instance, is one of the things I train on. So I could take a look at that. I put it into 2 to 5 minute short bursts. Well, yeah, I got 10 or 12 of them that they have to go through, but they're okay with doing that. And then cohort learning, which is a new way, a new method of learning, which has people do some online kinds of stuff, and then they come back and they get together and they get feedback and they get discussion on how it applies. And then I put together a new leadership course each month. So that was the solution I came up with to be able to match that. Now I want to talk a little bit about work-life balance preferences. You know, the person over here, the baby boomer, their long hours at the office are fine. Hard work is fine. That's okay. The Gen X's started that shift toward work-life balance. And then the millennials view work-life balance as this is not an option. This is what has to be. And then we have the Gen Zs, which value the work-life integration over the balance. So those are the kinds of things they're looking for. So look at yourself. How do your career goals that people have and their work-life balances, how does that differ in the generations in your workforce? And how are you accommodating those differences? When we look at purposeful work, that was another thing people wanted. Let's look at the different generations there. We've got the baby boomers who want that job security. Pay was important. Prestige is really important, the ego in a sense. When we look at the Gen X's, we start to see the same pattern that we've had before with the Gen X's. They want that work-life balance. They want flexibility. And then our millennials are purposeful work because their values should be that something that they do is going to contribute to societal good. And we've got our Gen Zs who say, okay, I want meaningful work and I want it to contribute to societal good, but I also want diversity, inclusion, and social responsibility in the workforce. So now we're starting to see, wow, there is a difference. So how we create purpose in jobs with repetitive tasks such as data entry, that's one of the questions you should be asking. And the answer is that we have to tie what they're doing in the job directly to the result, the overall outcome, and that they are part of the collaboration and the community that is producing what you finally produce as the end result. How about that collaborative and inclusive preferences? Well, we look at the baby boomers, they tend to value structured teamwork, hierarchies again, sounds familiar, doesn't it? Where the Gen X's prefer a balanced approach to teamwork. And that's because they always do have that one foot on one side and one foot on the other, particularly while the baby boomers are still there. Possibly when those baby boomers leave, they're going to trend more toward the millennials. Millennials favor collaborative, inclusive environments. They want their ideas to be freely shared and respected. And then we've got the Gen Zers who want that environment that values individuality. Remember, they're the more potential entrepreneurs on those Gen Zers. So your question is, how can we create collaboration within our organization? And here's two ways. One is to cultivate an environment where everybody feels like what they're producing and what they're contributing is valued and heard. So you can help by bridging that, by creating that more harmonious and productive environment, because that's what they're looking for. Over here, the way that we can do it is to implement diverse communication styles that suit different generations and having a variety of options. So let's look at exactly what I mean by that. In order to do that, I broke it down so that you can see it by generation. When we're looking at the baby boomers, we've got their communication style is really focus on this when you think about it. Preference is face-to-face communication for complex or sensitive issues. They want formal, they want well-structured, they value that face-to-face, one-to-one. So when you're navigating the communication with a baby boomer, you want to be sure you've got clear and formal communication for those serious matters, more face-to-face, phone calls maybe, but be respectful of hierarchy. Right? Then when we're looking at the Gen Xers, we're saying, okay, they like email and text, but they're comfortable face-to-face. See how that's one side on each side? So you can use email when you've got fast, direct communication you want, and then include them in decision-making whenever possible, because they like to say that they had a part in it, but they value that straightforward, direct communication. All right, now let's look at our millennials. They're comfortable with a variety of digital platforms, maybe email, instant messaging, social media. They want it casual, they want it informal, they want it real time. So when you think about that, you say, maybe I need to have a little bit more of that than I have, keeping our communication as casual and open without the formality to it. And then the Gen Zers, they are just digital natives because they're anything, whether it's a social media network, anything digital, that's fine. They want bite size, they want visual, they want direct. So we have to think about all of these things. They want their feedback too, as we think about how we onboard and how we upskill and how we manage these areas. So ask yourself again, what strategies can we adopt for incorporating a diversity of communication styles that cater to all of our generations? And meeting preferences is one of the ways that we can do it and that we should look at. So remember, you're going to have a very formalized meeting, who's in charge, etc., when you've got that baby boomer. But that's not necessarily, and of course, you've got the Gen Xer that can go either way. But when you're looking toward the millennials, they want more virtual meetings using a variety of digital platforms. And when you're looking at the Gen Zers, they want virtual and short, efficient meetings with inclusion. So I've given you lots of information here. You can go back and look at those. But I've put together some strategies that you could use for effective meetings that I'd like you to take a look at when you have time to go back home. There are things like flexible formats, time efficiency, agendas, follow-up, participative, etc. So take a look at these when you have time. Why should I care? Because remember, I said you're going to have a lot lower turnover rates, because if they're highly engaged, they're not going to be leaving as likely. So you've got a 22% increase in productivity. You've got 5 times better engagement rates if they're highly engaged, and 59% lower turnover rates. That's why it's worth it. So some employee engagement tips. Good communication, and you can look at these in yourself to some degree and really drill down into it. Provide recognition where you can, celebrate things that you net, and do a lot of shout out kinds of things. Those are the things that we're talking about, because when you get back down to it, this is what they're looking for. This is it. And if you can get 87% less likely to leave, if you can provide this kind of culture, is it because they're highly engaged? Is it worth it? Yeah, because it's going to be expensive if you don't. So I put together an action plan for you on how to bridge generational differences. I hope you get a chance to look at that. And mainly you're looking at how can I foster mutual understanding? And I would tell you the bottom line to all of this is this. Don't ignore it. Don't put a cover over it. It's real. They know it. They feel it. You need to uncover it and talk about it. And go back to these things that I've given you as ideas and say, let's have some awareness that we know there are differences, and then let's talk about it. How can we bridge these differences to make our workplace a place where everyone wants to be? I've put together a workbook with some learning activities that I think will be helpful, discussion groups to talk about it, what the purpose of the meeting is that you can start talking about, and how to come to that common understanding that I think will be helpful. In conclusion, I would say this: harness the full potential, because they each bring something different to the table. Recognize awareness, and respect generational differences while still looking for that common ground. Foster that culture of understanding, respect, inclusivity. And it doesn't just mean hiring diversity, but giving people the opportunity and the awareness. And then navigate that shift to reap those benefits of diverse, collaborative, and productive teams. I'm doing something a little different that I'd just like to make you aware of. I decided to do, it's really inexpensive, a lead and succeed community. I'm only going to take 20 people, but I want a culture where people want to work. And so I have a program, and I put the URL on there for you to take a look at the webinar. And if you want to go directly to the program, this will be in the Austin annual meeting as well. I want to take 3 times a month for 90 minutes each, and a new course for leadership every month. And I've put it together in a story video, but I want it where people can communicate, people can have feedback, people can have discussion of how they're going to actually implement it. And I want to get those, I want a program where those supervisors are ramped up, and you're going to get, hopefully, out of this, somebody who understands the basics, and over a 6-month period has taken the time to really explore it. Anyway, that's where I'm going with my life. So just an idea. Here's my bottom line: powerful dreams inspire powerful action. Inspire yourself. Be that person that you wanted to be all along and that you know you are, because it counts and you can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nan. You're right, a lot of information in just an hour, because I mean, you're spanning 4 generations of people, but so important. And you're right, it's the workforce is changing. It has changed. It's going to continue to change. It's going to start to even go faster than it ever has before in our lifetimes. So thank you for helping us get better prepared for that, for understanding how to bridge that gap in the generations younger than us. I know all of the women in the circle. I pretty much know which generations everybody is in, and this information is important for all of us. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. And I can't wait to see you in Austin.
I can't wait either.
Yes, where you'll get to meet everybody in person.
I would love to do that.
Yeah, so ladies, if you have questions or if things pop up between now and Austin, bring your questions and take a look at the information that was sent out today. All of this information is in that packet. And you also have your mastermind groups later this week. So if you have questions, bring them to that too. And we'll keep this conversation going. Thank you, Nan. I so appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to just talk to people that are my peeps, because
Absolutely.
I've been there, done that.
That's
I know
right.
what you're going through.
That's right. And then we'll keep going through. And thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate it.